Welcome. This is your host, FTT, aka Paul McDonald Jr., and I'm here doing another live stream. So I hope everyone's doing good. Let's see. It's a late one for me in the UK. And as you can see, I look very tired, but I thought, let me get on here and just do a very, very unannounced YouTube video, YouTube live on a specific topic. So hope everyone's good. Let's just see. Steph J, hope you're good. Jamal, hope you're good. And Moonbeam, hope you're good, Moonbeam. Blessings. So like I said, apologies for the look. Pretty tired. But let me just props to my sis, Steph J. Props to you as well. My good bro, Samuel Elliott. Thanks very much for joining in. Brother Simeon, blessings. And blessings to you too. Oh, Connie's movie. How you doing, Sister Connie? I was thinking, where's Sister Connie? But yeah, blessings to you, sis. Blessings. So without further ado, this is not going to be a long video at all. This is a very, well, I wouldn't say very quick because you know how things go, but I don't aim to be long, probably about half an hour, if that. But don't quote me on that. We'll see how we go. But today is going to be on topic called the yoke of the rabbi. So taken from, and apologies, I'm in my front room today. Couldn't be in the normal room. I got a lot of stuff going on, so I'm in my front room today. But I thought, let me just jump on here very quickly and do a quick session or a quick teaching on the yoke of the rabbi. Blessings to my good bro, Mr. Rick Real, Mr. Rick Barboa. He's a fellow minister of mine that we co-work. You've seen him in our episodes that we do on how to read the Bible series. So that's my good bro, Rick. Hope you're doing good, my friend. Let me just pull up my screen here. But I'm going to get into this teaching straight away. So it's taken from Matthew chapter 11 from verses 29 and verse 30. And it's a common passage where Jesus says, take my yoke on you. And it's just a quick topic that I just wanted to kind of go over and just to see if there's any cultural clues that we can glean from what Jesus means by taking his yoke. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, if you just bear with me for a moment as well. Let's see what we have here. Share screen. Let's have a look. Right. Okay. Forgive me if my internet's a little low. But yeah, here we go. So the yoke of the rabbi. So I hope everyone can see perfectly fine. I'm not gonna go full screen. I'll probably just leave it like this. If I need to go full screen, if I need to look, then maybe yeah. But anyway, we're gonna get into it. So the yoke of the rabbi. So it's a common passage where Jesus says, take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for my yoke is easy and my burden's light. Okay. And I just kind of wanted to survey this and just to see, is there any cultural clues that's going on? Is Jesus speaking of a vacuum, or is Jesus speaking within a cultural context? So let me repeat that. Is Jesus speaking from a vacuum? Is he inventing something new? Or is he speaking within a cultural context? And, you know, I've heard many sermons on this passage. Thanks, Sister Connie. Seeing it looks good so far. Appreciate that. And I've heard many sermons on this passage as well. You know, and I just wanted to kind of go in and just to see if there's a deeper meaning of this text. So before I go any further, like, subscribe, and share. I'm planning to be more consistent with my content. I know I do like a video every year, but planning to be more consistent with my content. So yeah, like, subscribe, and share, and let's go from here. So the yoke of the rabbi. So let's go. So I'm going to introduce a few things. Idioms. Okay. So we all know what an idiom is. And again, my target audience are lay persons. Okay. Your everyday pew attendees. That's my audience. If you don't know already, right? So it's not for the high scholarly or anything like that. But my aim is to bring academia and bring scholarship to those who are in the pews. Okay. So here we go. So we all know what an idiom is, right? And it's just, my definition, which I believe encompasses what an idiom means. So idioms or idiomatic phrase, they're phrases used to convey ideas that usually have little to no connection with the words that are used, right? So for example, curiosity killed the cat, right? So, what do we mean by that? You're asking too much questions. Okay. If someone was to say pigs fly, we know what that means. You're lying. All right. And sorry if you don't understand what these are. I am speaking from within a British context. Okay. Hashtag London. Okay. So pigs fly means you're lying. Different kettle of fish. That's an idiom to, it could mean a different kind of person, or this person is just weird. You're right. So, or just not the norm. Out the pan into the fire, common one, from one set of trouble to another set of trouble, right? And straight out the horse's mouth, I heard it straight from the source, right? So these are idioms. So they are phrases used to convey ideas, and sometimes the word in the phrase or the words used in the phrases have little or nothing to do with the actual words. So if you say pigs fly, you mean lying. Now, pigs and flying have nothing to do with telling a lie. Okay, so sometimes the words have nothing to do, or the understanding or the idiom has nothing to do with the actual words that's being used. Okay, so it's just basic idioms, and there's a reason why I'm going in this direction. Okay, now let's have a look at Jewish idioms. Okay, so slightly controversial, but these will help. Okay, so 3 days and 3 nights is actually a Jewish idiom, or an idiomatic way to simply say 3 days. Okay, so I've got here some scriptural references. So when the Jews, specifically in the Old Testament, when they say 3 days and 3 nights, they don't mean literally 3 days and 3 nights. 3 days and 3 nights is an idiomatic way to simply say 3 days. Okay, so if we look in the Old Testament, if we look at Esther chapter 4, verse 16, and again, I'm not bringing up every scriptural reference on the screen. I'll just bring up like the little citations, and we can go away and do our homework in that regard. But if you look at Esther chapter 4, verse 16, Mordecai comes and tells Esther regarding the decree that has been declared that every Jew without the provinces, different provinces, will be destroyed. So Esther states that she's going to go into fasting and prayer. And then she states she is going to fast for 3 days and 3 nights. Depending on what translation you read, it will say day or night, or 3 days and 3 nights. Well, she specifically alludes to the fact that she will be fasting and praying for 3 days and 3 nights. And then if you go to the very next chapter, so Esther then chapter 5, verse 1, the narrator says on the 3rd day, right? So right there and then, is there a contradiction? Because Esther says 3 days and 3 nights, but then in Esther 5, verse 1, the narrator says on the 3rd day. Okay. Another example is 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 12. And haven't committed this one to memory, so let me just actually go there on my end, see if I've still got it. So 1 Samuel chapter 30, and if you go to verse 12, and I'm reading from the ESV, It's talking about this person that was left. And it says here, they gave him a piece of bread. Sorry, and they gave him a piece of cake of fig and 2 clusters of raisins. And when he had eaten, his spirit revived, for he had not eaten bread or drank water for 3 days and 3 nights. Okay, so notice he had not eaten bread or drunken water for 3 days and 3 nights. Then verse 13, and David the king, so this is King David, David said to him, to whom do you belong? And where are you from? And then he said, I am a young man of Egypt, servant to an Amalekite, and my master left me behind because I fell sick 3 days ago. Right? So notice in verse 12, he said the narrator says he has not eaten bread or drunken water for 3 days and 3 nights. But then when he speaks to David, the king, he says, my master left me 3 days ago. So just like in Esther, is there a contradiction? Because the narrator is saying 3 days and 3 nights, or the individual is saying 3 days and 3 nights. But then when further clarification is being done, it's 3 days. Okay, so we see that this, 3 days and 3 nights is a Jewish idiom to simply convey 3 days. So, we can flash forward to the time of Jesus when he says, 3 days and 3 nights, I will be in the belly of the whale like Jonah. But then in scripture, on the third day, right? Early Sunday morning on the third day. Okay, so we can see that's an idiom to simply say 3 days. There's a next one here, and I'm going to go through quickly. Another Jewish idiom is the words fulfill and destroy. Okay, so the word fulfill means to interpret scripture correctly. So anytime a rabbi or somebody who was exegeting Torah, when they were exegeting or interpreting scripture correctly, the hearers would say, you are fulfilling Torah, or you are fulfilling the word. And if somebody was misinterpreting Torah or misinterpreting scripture, the crowd will say, you are destroying Torah. Okay, these are idioms. All right, so this should lend credence to when Jesus says, think not that I have come to destroy the law or destroy Torah. I have not come to destroy, but to fulfill. Right? So that gives you like a cultural understanding of Jesus fulfilling Torah, which means he's providing, hence why when you read, ye have heard it has been said of old time, do this, do that, or thou shalt not. But I say unto you. So he is fulfilling, given a more fulling or filling of Torah, exegeting scripture properly, right? And that's why when you continue reading the narrative, it says he taught not as the scribes, but one who has authority. Okay, so this is just a bit of a cultural understanding of what fulfill and destroy means. Another one is a Jewish idiom, mountain mover. All right, so what do you have with mountain mover? Excuse me. Mountain mover was a Jewish idiom to mean a problem solver, or somebody that can handle difficult tasks. Okay, so for example, a rabbi or a Jewish sage who was adept and knowledgeable in Torah, people will bring their struggles or their difficulties to him, and they would sit down and listen to their teaching and listen to how they would solve this problem. And they would be deemed mountain movers because of their ability to thwart difficult situations, right? So when we look at Jesus and his disciples with little faith, because they couldn't handle a situation, he says, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain. So in essence, Jesus was saying to them, you can be mountain movers. Nothing will be too hard for you to do if you but had faith. That is in essence what Jesus was telling. So Nicodemus would be seen as a mountain mover. You could say King Solomon in all his wisdom would be deemed a mountain mover. The rabbis and the sages, right, would be deemed mountain movers because of their knowledge of Torah and their experience and wisdom to handle certain difficult situations. And that's what Jesus was saying to his disciples who couldn't handle the situation that befell them. And Jesus was saying, if you had faith as a mustard seed, you can be a mountain mover. In other words, you know there will be no difficult task that you can't handle. You can say to this mountain, uproot, right? So that's what mountain movers meant culturally. And here we are, the last one, sitting under the feet of a rabbi or their yoke meant student or tutor. Okay, so we can hashtag, for example, when the Apostle Paul says, not just the Apostle Paul, but he does say this in his epistles, but Paul, Peter, and the council at Jerusalem in Acts chapter 15. Okay, when Peter says, where he says to the congregation, how can we put a yoke on the Gentiles that we ourselves and our forefathers couldn't bear? What yoke was he talking about? The instructions of the law, the instructions of Mosaic Torah, the Brit Malah, which is the covenant of circumcision, which follows the kashrut laws, dietary laws, and the Sabbaths and the divers washings and cleansing and rituals and so on and so forth. And Peter was saying, how can we enforce a law, a yoke, this teaching, this doctrine, where we ourselves found it difficult to bear? Okay, so yoke simply meant instructions. It meant it's a discipline, it's a teaching. And what is synonymous with that is sitting up under somebody's feet. And Paul mentions, I think it's in Acts 22, when he says he sat at the feet of Gamaliel, which simply means that he was under the tuition or the house or the school of study of Gamaliel. So that's where he got his education. Sitting up under the feet of a rabbi or taking a rabbi's yoke meant taking their teaching or taking their doctrine or their instruction. Okay, and Mr. Rick Real here mentioned, cover binding and loosing, and that's a good one as well. But binding and loosing, I believe in context simply meant, in essence, I believe it's what was agreed among the community, right? So where two or three are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of bless. Might be a different one, but whatsoever you bind in heaven will be bound on earth, and whatsoever you I think that's the scripture. I'll have to put it up. I might put it up at the end actually. But even the one I mentioned before, right? Binding and loosing isn't in the context that we think it's in regarding, I bind you in that sense. It's talking about permissible, right? In what you deem is permissible in that sense, which will be loosing. Okay. So that's actually a great one there, brother Rick. So glad you brought that up. Okay, so Jewish idiom. So let's move forward. And so I'm still looking at the screen, and like I said, I don't plan to be on too long. So let me go back to this one before I go. Matthew 18. Appreciate that, bro. So before I go any further, so just again under the last one. So sitting up under a rabbi's feet, or taking on the rabbi's yoke, meant taking on their wisdom and their instruction of the law of Torah, of teaching. Okay, so they are reading Torah, reading the law, and imparting to their students instructions, doctrines, and interpretation. So they are giving you wisdom. They are giving you tuition. Okay, so it is rabbi and his disciples, rabbi or a teacher and his students. Okay, a rabbi and the Talmudim, which is their disciples. Hence why Jesus was a rabbi, and you have disciples or students. Okay, so sitting up under the rabbi's feet or taking on their yoke. So the rabbi again is imparting instruction and interpretation. Okay, so let's go forward. So I'm gonna dive into the Psalms and the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, just so that we can hear more clearly and more accurate from the Old Testament what Jesus is conveying. And the reason why I mention that is because, again, when we hear, or for me personally, take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I've often heard the interpretation, the yoke of Jesus is easy in the sense of trials and tribulations, right? Or the yoke of Jesus is different from the yoke of the world. The world, heavy burdensome, is burden and yoke, where the yoke and the burden of Christ is easy because he carried our yoke and burdens to Calvary. So I've often heard yoke and burden synonymous with the heavy weight of life, or heavy burdens of either sin or struggles in that sense. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is find or identify cultural clues which may give us a more deeper understanding of what Jesus meant. So as I mentioned before already, yoke of the rabbi, sitting up under the feet of the rabbi, it's more contextually understood as discipline, instruction, okay, tuition. So from the Old Testament, because Jesus wasn't speaking from a vacuum, he was speaking within a cultural context and a theological context. I'm going to read here a few excerpts. So the fear of the Lord, so listen to this. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. A good understanding have all those who do what? His commandments. So it's the fear of the Lord, the respect of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And a good understanding have all those who do his commandments. So notice wisdom, commandments. Okay. And to better understand Hindaites or parallelism, I would highly recommend watching the video that Rick Reel is in the Rick Barboa is here as well. We did a video, I believe it was last week, covering tools on how to read the Bible, and we covered Hindaites, we covered parallelism, and these are essential for understanding specific texts. So let me go to the next one. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. So this is what you call antithetical parallelism. I'm not going to explain what antithetical parallelism is in this video. Again, watch How to Read the Bible Part 3. So if you go on my channel, and if you search for How to Read the Bible Part 3, we cover these techniques, parallelism and Hindaites. So it says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. So the reverence and respect of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Then the antithetical parallelism, fools despise wisdom and instruction. So listen to this. The reverence and the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. So how one gains knowledge is reverence and respect. But fools, they despise wisdom and instruction. So there's something about knowledge, wisdom, and reverence. Okay. Proverbs chapter 1, verses 20-22. I like this one. So look how the author personifies wisdom. Okay, and I'm getting to a point with these Old Testament passages. Wisdom shouts in the streets. So wisdom is now personified as a woman. Wisdom shouts in the streets. She lifts her voice in the square. At the head of the noisy streets, she cries out. At the entrance of the gates in the city, she utters her sayings. So what is wisdom crying out? What is she saying in the street? How long, O naive ones, will you love being simple-minded? And scoffers delight themselves in scoffing, and fools hate knowledge. So wisdom is in the street crying out. And wisdom, what is wisdom saying? Fools hate knowledge. And how long will you remain in being naive. So it's almost like wisdom wants to teach, and wisdom is rebuking fools for not attaining knowledge. Okay, but how does one attain knowledge? The fear or reverence of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, obeying his commandments, which is instruction. Okay, the Psalms we just read. Another excerpt, Proverbs 9, verses 1 to 6. Wisdom, again personified, wisdom has built her house. She has hewed out her 7 pillars. Okay, she has prepared her food. She has mixed her wine. She has also set her table. So look at the personification. Wisdom has created a house. Okay, built a home. She's hewn out 7 pillars. Wisdom in the house has what? Prepared food. So wisdom is cooking, prepared food, and mixed wine, and prepared a table. Okay. Then what happens? Wisdom, she now sends out her maidens, and she calls from the tops of the heights of the city. Whoever is naive, let him turn in here. So what is the food a representative of? Listening to wisdom's teaching. To him who lacks understanding, she says, come, eat of my food and drink of my wine I have mixed. Forsake your folly and live, and proceed in the way of understanding. So again, wisdom is shouting from the rooftop in the previous proverb. And in this one, wisdom has prepared a home, prepared a table, and inviting them to eat of her bread, right? Eat of and drink of her wine, so that you may no longer be in ignorance, but you may learn what wisdom has to say. Okay. Now, I'm going to get into some scholarship stuff, but watch this. So rabbis invited people. So this is now within the time of Christ and a bit before. Okay, a bit before. Rabbis invited people to learn to keep the scriptures and commandments, which is the Old Testament in their time. So they invited people to learn. This is what rabbis did. They invited one to come and learn. Rabbis like Yeshua, this is Jesus, who taught with authority and taught new interpretations of scripture and passed legal judgments, would have a new yoke of Torah to pass down to their disciples. Okay, so it was new yokes of Torah because a rabbi had set interpretations. Okay, you had different rabbis which represented different schools. Okay, they had the school of Hillel and Shammai. Okay, these were different schools of thought. Okay, and a rabbi would impart their own yoke, their own instruction, their interpretation, and they would pass them down to their students. Okay, Yeshua did not change the commandments of his father, but kept it perfectly. He had the yoke of Torah upon himself and correctly passed down the teachings and instructions of his father to his disciples. So look at the Old Testament citations. Isaiah chapter 55, verses 1 to 4. Come, everyone who is thirsty, right? Come and buy wine or buy water without price. Yeah, you were sold for naught and you will be bought for naught. But what is that buying of the wine and water? What is that? Ho, everyone who is athirst, come. What is that synonymous with? Verse 3, incline your ear and come to me that you may live. Verse 4, a leader of commandments to the people. So the buying, right, when you look at Isaiah 55, and then it says, incline your ear and come and hear of the law or hear of the commandments. It's saying, come and drink. All right, come back. So remember in Isaiah, the prophecy of Isaiah, the people were in, it was a prophesying of people or the people of Israel being in captivity. And the reason why they were in captivity is because they disobeyed God's laws, his commandments, his Torahs. Okay. I believe it was coming from a prophet, but these people worship me with their lips, but their heart is far. Okay. So hence the captivity. But Isaiah is prophesying a return. And what is the return? It says, come and drink. If you're thirsty, come and drink. But it also says, incline your ear and come so that you may live. A leader of the commandments to the people. It's reestablishing the covenant back to the people. And they have to hearken unto wisdom, the wisdom of God displayed in his commandments. And we can see this as a cross. You can see the cross reference there, John chapter 7. What does Jesus say on the great day of the feast? If anyone thirsts, let him come and what? Drink. Now, what does that mean symbolically or metaphorically? Jesus is talking about his teaching. Jesus is talking about his instruction. If you are thirsty, come to me and drink. So he's talking about what he has to give, his teaching, his instruction, his interpretation. Okay, so, and his wisdom, the wisdom that he is imparting. So here's a rabbi, and I'm almost come to the end. So here's a rabbi. This is Ben Sirah, and he lived approximately, or the writings at least, 2 centuries before Christ, right? So the 2nd century BCE. And look what he writes. Listen to the language. Ben Sirah is a rabbi. Okay, he's a sage, right? And listen to what he writes. He says, "Draw near to me, you who are uneducated, and lodge in the house of instruction." Doesn't that sound? Am I losing sound? Losing sound intimately. Okay. Hopefully I'm coming through. Testing 1 2. Hopefully I'm coming through. But hopefully you'll let me know if I'm coming through. But listen to how Ben Sirah sounds just like the Proverbs that we read, the Psalms that we read, in regarding wisdom, education, wisdom screaming in the streets, right? You know, come and eat of my bread because you are naive, right? Listen to what, okay, I'm coming through. Perfect. Listen to what Ben Sirah says, and listen to how he says, "Draw near to me," this is a rabbi, "you who are unlearned, and lodge in the house of instruction." Remember, wisdom has built her house. Okay. Then it says, what does he continue to say? When you come into the house of instruction, you can say this is a synonymous parallelism, put your neck under her yoke and let your souls receive instruction. Okay. Now, and it says, it is to be found close by. So I'm going to read this without pausing. "Draw near to me, you who are uneducated, and lodge in the house of instruction. Put your neck under her yoke and let your souls receive instruction. It is to be found close by." And then it says, "See with your own eyes that I have labored but a little and found for myself much serenity." This is 200 years before Jesus, at least. Okay. And he's telling in his literature, okay, lodge in the house of instruction. That's wisdom. Okay. Put your neck under her yoke. What does yoke mean? Does yoke here mean the struggles of the world? Right? Does yoke or burdens mean the trials that come with the world? Or does yoke mean when you go into the house of instruction, put your neck under her yoke, bind yourselves with this teacher, learn the wisdom that this teacher is going to impart, okay? And let your souls receive instruction. And as a result, it says, "I have labored a little and found for myself serenity," rest for your souls. Doesn't that sound like Jesus? And look, see, and compare that with what Christ said. "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn." See, oftentimes when I hear the sermon, we forget this part. I often hear, "Take my yoke upon you." And that's it. And the sermon kicks off. And yoke means, struggles and so on and so forth. But Jesus says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Yet when we go back to Ben Sirah, 200 years, put your neck under her yoke and let your soul receive what? Instruction. Lodge in the house of instruction. So putting yourself under wisdom's yoke means putting yourself under wisdom's stewardship, under wisdom's tuition, under wisdom's guidance, on sitting at the feet of wisdom. And that's what Jesus says. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. Okay? For I am gentle and humble in heart. That is the nature of Rabbi Jesus. And you will find what? Rest for your souls. Look what Ben Sirach says. And found for myself what? Much serenity, because you are hearkening to instruction, to wisdom. This is what it does for your heart and your soul. It gives you rest. It gives you serenity. It gives you peace. And Jesus says, when you take his yoke, you will find rest for your souls. Why? For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. This can be seen as a hendiety. Again, go back to our episode on how to read the Bible, part 3. And Yeshua speaks beautifully, breaks down what a hendiety means. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Yoke is synonymous with burden. So what is Jesus saying here? Is he saying, the struggles of life is hard, but if you take my struggles, right, or I have carried the load for you, hence why the struggles of Christ or the yoke of Christ isn't that much more difficult? Or is he actually talking about his wisdom, his teaching, right, that you can find rest for your souls? Because his yoke, putting yourself up under the yoke of Christ or sitting at the feet of Christ, you will find rest for your souls, because his yoke is easy and his burden light. I think I have one more slide to go through, and it's just basically a summing up. And this is from David De Silva, and it says, Jesus' invitation to all to come to him, take up his yoke of instruction and find rest with little labor, brings together elements from wisdom's invitation to do the same. So Jesus is not speaking out of a vacuum. As we read in the Psalms and Proverbs, wisdom is crying in the street. How long will you remain naive? Wisdom has built a house, cooked a meal, and gone out to invite people to partake of her bread. And that is synonymous with understanding. Ben Sirah says, when it talks about wisdom, put your neck under wisdom's yoke and learn, because it will find serenity. And what De Silva says, when Jesus says, come unto me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, I will give you rest. Take my yoke and learn. Jesus is inviting people to come to him, take his yoke of instruction, and you will find rest. And it brings together elements from wisdom's invitation to do the same. Such an invitation, combined with Jesus's frequent use of maxims, sayings, and instructions in his own teaching, may suggest that one important category Jesus gave his contemporaries for understanding his ministry was that of a wisdom teacher or a sage, one who shows the way to live well pleasing to God and advantageously among people. So Jesus is saying, take his instruction. We can cross-reference this to, and this is a common misunderstanding. I think it's in the Gospel of John, maybe around about the chapter 15 to 16 mark, where Jesus says, a new commandment I give unto you, which is what? Love one another as love one another as I have loved you. This is, so, and that's why John in his epistle conveys to say the same thing. When he says that which you have heard from the beginning, he says, this is the commandment, that ye love one another. You believe on the name of the Son and love one another as he gave us commandment. So when it says a new commandment, right, it's talking about Jesus's instruction or his yoke. Okay, so when you look at what Jesus says, and this is a very important thing as well, when he says a new commandment, this has to be understood and read in light of a rabbi speaking to his students. So he is talking to his students, whether it was 12 at the time. He is saying to them, this new commandment I am giving to you. So again, that is a rabbi speaking to his disciples. This commandment, this teaching, instruction I am giving you, love one another as I have loved you. Right? So it's read in light of Rabbi, his yoke, and the students under his feet. Okay, and so we can see with the I got one more slide, and again from De Silva, Jesus's use of such language may have invited the hearers to view him as a teacher of wisdom, an interpreter of Torah, and to view attaching themselves to his group of disciples as a kind of attaching themselves to wisdom school or a school of wisdom. So remember, they had the Old Testament, they were familiar with the Old Testament. So when Jesus is using these motifs, these allusions, take my yoke, they're familiar with this language, they're familiar with the allusions. He is speaking from the Old Testament, from Isaiah 55, as I read, right? Come to me, or you are thirsty, come to the waters, without money, without price, right? Then it says, listen and learn, right, from the commandments. He's speaking from wisdom, has built her house and made a meal and is crying for people to partake. Ben Sira says, put your neck under the yoke of wisdom. So when Jesus is doing the same thing, they are hearing him convey the idea that he is a teacher or the true teacher of wisdom, an interpreter of the Torah. And they are to view themselves as attaching themselves to his school of discipline. Okay, so that is the end of the slides that I have. So let me go ahead and put this down. So in summary, in Matthew 11, when Jesus says, come unto me, all you who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. For I am meek and humble, and you will find rest to your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. What Jesus is actually conveying is his teaching, his dogmas, his principle. He is talking about wisdom and instruction from the perspective of a rabbi to his students. Okay, so yoke is not necessarily, the struggles of the world, and Jesus is taking our struggles of the world and giving us his yoke, because his yoke, being a follower of Jesus or being a Christian, is easier than taking on the yokes of the world or sin for that matter. What Jesus is actually conveying in the cultural, and again, I don't, there's nothing wrong with applying that, because we can use that scripture in application, and many do it that way. But what Jesus is conveying here, he is conveying his wisdom, his understanding, his knowledge, his school of thought, his interpretation of the law, his interpretation of Moses, and he's saying to them, take my yoke, right, and learn of me, because for my yoke is easy and my burden is light, and you will find rest, right? It gives you a rest to your souls. So he is speaking from the cultural and social theological context of wisdom. This is a wisdom motif. Wisdom built her house. Wisdom invites people to eat of her bread. Ben Sirah, put your neck under the yoke of wisdom. So Jesus is speaking from a wisdom motif, inviting his disciples and all those around him to take his yoke and learn of him. So that's basically the summary and kind of what I wanted to just convey in this video. Like I said, I didn't plan to be long, and I've gone over the half an hour mark, but this is in essence what this scripture meant culturally and theologically, what the immediate recipients would understand. Jesus is speaking from a wisdom perspective and a teacher and a sage. So this is what they would understand. So come to the end. This is it. I'm not going to drag out anymore. I believe I've repeated myself long enough. But I appreciate for tuning in. I'm not sure if there's any questions or any statements. I see my good bro Rick Rio here again, Rick Baboa. We're planning to do just as a shameless plug. We are planning to do episode 4 on how to read the Bible, and we'll iron out what topics we'll go through. Maybe polemics, or probably something. We'll go to something else. We've got polemics to do. We've got contextuality to do. I believe we've covered intertextuality as well. In episode 2, we covered intertextuality, but we can redo polemics. We can redo. Maybe we can do something in Genesis, but we'll provide more tools and information as we go. So appreciate you hanging in, Brother Rick. Brother Simeon, hope you're doing good, my friend. Blessings to you. I'm not sure if there's any other cues or whatever, but looks like everyone has sort of got the context. So, and Sister Steph, blessings, sis, and Moonbeam, which is our Sister Connie. Blessings, blessings, blessings. So, without further ado, appreciate for hanging in long. And I am in the UK, so it is pretty late where I am. So, without further ado, and that being said, tune in, like and subscribe, and again, please share, because the more views we have is the more people we can educate as well. And again, it's for lay persons. Okay, so like and subscribe, and definitely share across platforms as well. And I believe there's one more comment. Bless you, Sister Moon, Sister Connie. But yeah, appreciate that. And this is the feedback that's most appreciated, and what we're looking for. It's to reach individuals, again, that are of a lay understanding of scripture, bringing the academia to the pews. So appreciate the comments, appreciate that. And without further ado, I believe that I will call down the cool down. So thanks very much. Tune in again, share, and be with you shortly. Take care.